Hi, welcome everybody. No?
No, none of them.
Okay.
Where starts. Yeah, it says 6 now.
Now it's 6.
Good evening, everybody. We will now call to order the August 17th Council Workshop. Before we start, just a couple announcements that I made last week. Everyone here, please speak into your microphones and look at the owl in front of you. That's what picks you up. With the delay in video, please get the attention of the deputy mayor or the mayor, whoever's here, to let someone know that you wish to speak. I've got a second monitor here so I can see Councilmember Ishmael and McClymans, but if anyone on here sees them and I don't, please let me know. Try not to talk over each other. It's difficult for the microphones to pick it up. And if you don't need internet, please turn off your Wi-Fi to ensure our ability to stream without slowdowns and dropouts. All right, we'll bring this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Please note for the record that Mayor Johnson is not in attendance. Deputy Mayor Evans,
Here.
Councilmember Carter,
Here.
Councilmember Dole,
Here.
Councilmember Ishmael,
Present.
Councilmember McClymans,
Here.
Member Swatman,
Present.
Councilmember Watson.
Here. Here, everybody. We will start this meeting with council open discussion. Councilmember Watson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. A couple things. Councilman Swatman and myself attended the Community for Families Coalition meeting on August 5th. A good turnout there. They talked about back to school and needed more backpacks. They also needed more crayons, and I acquired 500 crayons for them to help out for the Summer Family Center. And they have back to school dates for Lions Kids House is on the 24th, and they're going to have a store there for the kids and food, and they're going to have ice cream truck to come by over there by our kids' house. Be really good kids that way. We also went into detail about future meetings, discussions about future CFI meetings, what we should offer, what we should talk about, what our concerns were for the next future. That way, good planning, all the groups together. And they have back to school for the Southern Bonney School District, August 17th, Liberty Ridge Elementary. That bill's on August 19th, and Sumner Family Center August 24th and 26th. I think that's about it for that meeting. Also, I have a thought I want to bring forward to us. We have a few newer council members, and we may or may not have newer ones later on next year. I was held in consideration. We had a committee of the whole a few years ago. I was thinking possibly we can make our meetings a little more constructive and full. If we could have our individual meetings, that at our workshops we could have information brought to us here so the whole council can see what's going on and understand what's coming forward instead of having bits and pieces. For example, tonight we talked about the sewer center, our center down in Thunder. A lot involved. We had a great overview of the facility down there. That'd be great for all the council members to see that, but they'd have to get secondary, get a tour down there. So this is something we may want to think about come the first year. So we're all involved. I miss a lot of things on public safety. I really enjoyed that a lot. Not seeing what you're being brought to you, except looking at your notes and stuff, or what you're telling us. And so I think it'd be good for all groups for us to consider that. All I have.
All right. Anyone else for open discussion? Councilmember Swatman?
Yeah, just a note for council, or kind of a reminder, I guess, for myself that the public comment period, when we do that with citizens, that they often, that's indeed their forum, a free speech forum, literally for them to say what they want to say, so that they can give us as a full council information. But it's not a two-way dialogue. So, note to self, when somebody's claiming the world is flat, and unless we correct them, they're going to claim that it is flat, then that's their right to do. So just because we don't answer them doesn't mean that, what they're saying is factual. So I always get a little bit kind of with some of the comments because, again, that's their right to say what they want to say. Doesn't mean that it's ultra accurate what they're saying. You always have to take all that stuff in, do all the different pieces.
Anyone else with the order? Okay. Councilmember Carter.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I would just echo what Councilman Watson possibly getting for council, giving everybody a chance. We don't see everything, and it's or whatnot. But as notes are council members ask questions. What questions did they ask? Did they ask the same question that I would have asked? And it's not to say that we don't trust what they're doing or anything, it's just we're all coming. So I think it would be important. And I've also, second, often just said about being accurate. That's very. Thank you. I think Councilmember McLeod has had his hand up.
Oh, okay. Councilmember Clements?
Yeah, was I the only one who was having trouble hearing Terry? Was Councilman Carter?
They want to hear you.
Quite, yeah, possibly.
Yeah, I can't hear him. He was cut out almost the whole time.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
What I was saying is that I agreed with Councilmember Watson on these, and that I think we should try the committee of a whole probably when it comes to January, if that's what that council wants at the time. But I think it's good to bring it up now so that it's being thought of ahead of time. There are some things that we don't see in the council minutes and whatnot, so we don't know every question that gets asked on different committees. We're all coming at things from a different angle, and so I think it's important for us to be able to ask those questions. And then I also agree with Councilmember Swatman in regards to when somebody says something, we don't have to respond, and just because they say it doesn't mean it's accurate.
Councilmember Swatman?
Yeah, very much support my council members' ideas about full council meetings. Hopefully we'll be able to see what the council at that point in time wants to come next year, maybe a little bit sooner depending on, because we'll have some of the council seats settled in November 17th. Well, that'll be your seat, of course. Also, let's see. So if before then any council member, I think they all get the agendas, right, from the committee. So I know for my committee, if any of the council members see something that they're, please give me a note, and then I'll just pull it off of our agenda and I'll stick it on a workshop if we can do that. So happy to do that with anything currently that you would want to do that with prior to changing stuff. So I don't want you to have to wait until January to talk about.
Anything else, Councilmember Ishmael or Clements?
Deputy Mayor.
I think it's a great idea. I'm in complete agreement with Tom and Terry on this one. I think it would be very beneficial and would actually, I think it would make our discussions more open to not only each other, but to the public. And so the public knows that we're not hiding anything and discussing things behind closed doors that they don't have access to. And if they're so involved that they can participate more, I think it would be just a really good way to just open ourselves up fully to the community and to have a greater value to our discussion as members. So I agree.
Thank you.
And the first year, also think about it between for all of us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Else for open discussion? Moving on to agenda item B, review of council members. Minutes, Councilmember.
One minor correction.
With us?
I did.
Okay.
Can't you talk today?
Item C, discussion on the emergency management position. It's a recommendation coming out of Public Safety Committee. There has been a memo that was issued with this. I'll turn it over to Woody to discuss.
Well, council members, hopefully you've all had the opportunity to look at the memo and read it, consider it. And so I'll just briefly summarize, just to start your discussion. In this memo, I kind of gave a brief history of emergency management for the city of Bonney Lake, and essentially, the essential takeaway is we haven't really given it a lot of focus. for probably 20-some years. And we have recently joined the East Pierce Interlocal Coalition for Emergency Management. We call it EPIC-EM. And that has given new momentum to our emergency management efforts. However, we don't have the staff really to follow up on it. Our efforts in emergency management have been in as available duty for many of our staff members. I was thinking today that you may not be familiar, and you can't see it from here when I hold it up, but I'll kind of tell you what it is. If I don't know if you can see this, at least see that I'm holding up a sheet of paper. It has different colors on it, and there is an operations section, a planning section, a logistics section, and a finance section to an emergency operations center setup. And this represents about, if we were to call up our full emergency operations center right now, this represents 90 people in our city organization. But it's 90 people who, by and large, don't have an understanding of what their role is. And they haven't had the training, they haven't had the experience, and they haven't had the pressure to understand what their roles are. And so it is hopeful that by hiring a position that can be a full-time position to coordinate the preparation of people in their roles and the city's plans, that we can be better prepared as a city organization to deal with emergencies as they come in our city. You know, we last summer we dealt with the Sumner Grade fire, and we did a pretty good job. We noticed that there were things that we needed to do to improve, but again, it falls as another duty, an extra duty, or a duty as assigned, and we don't have consistent follow-up to improve those. And so this position would be used by I'm proposing that it would be used by the executive department to focus on emergency management and our emergency management preparation, so that when we do have another major event, we will be better prepared and better able to respond. And when we have something that's even bigger than a Sumner Grade fire, which will undoubtedly happen, we will be in a better position to respond and assist our citizens. Another component that we're hopeful this position can take on is coordinating outreach to the public, so that the public also can be better prepared and have a better understanding of how they can help themselves, because we can't help everyone. We don't have the manpower to do that or the resources. So that, in a nutshell, is kind of what I'm asking. I'm sorry, it probably took a little bit longer than it would have maybe to read the whole memo. But that, again, in a nutshell, that's what we're talking about.
Thank you, Woody. I know this is something we've been talking about for the last 6 years that I've been on council, and I know it's something you've been really passionate about. And your upcoming retirement is going to leave a significant gap, even as prepared as we are for what we have. There's still a lot more work that can be done. And from my understanding, Ryan, who's taken the ball on this, and from one extremely overworked, understaffed department to another overworked, understaffed department, I don't know how you could be set up for success without someone like this in the organization, because obviously you don't have the staffing right now to take this on. If even Woody doesn't have it currently, he won't have it next year. So is that the case? Is that what you would see?
It is. Public services is the largest department in the city. We have a lot going on, as you know. One thing that's become apparent to me, though, is as Woody and I have had a chance to go to these epic meetings together, gaining the understanding that as Bonney Lake, we're kind of looked to provide some sort of regional support up here on the plateau as well. And so being prepared for that, not just being prepared for us here ourselves, but being prepared to also provide some of that assistance that's going to be necessary to work regionally is frankly, I think a little bit beyond the scope of those of us who would only be able to work on this part-time, very part-time at best. And all of us want to do a good job here, and none of us like to feel like we're not able to do what it is we signed up for. But this is a struggle, and I really do believe, as Woody does, it would be a huge benefit for us to have somebody full-time in this position who could be here on site tackling these issues.
Councilman Grisham, you have your hand up?
Yes, I just wanted to follow up on this from public safety. And I met with Mr. Johnstone about this very particular issue, and I met with Woody about this particular issue because I'm very passionate about emergency management preparedness. And where I think the interlocal agreement was a really terrific start when we came out of the 2020 fires, but I am absolutely 100% behind hiring someone to be directly involved and to take on this role for emergency management. And following up on what Mr. Johnstone was saying, that we are looked to Bonney Lake as a regional support system for emergency management from all the school districts in the valley, from some Bonney Lake School District to Wilkinson to private Cascade Christian down in the Sumner Valley. Their children are all going to be bused or carried by car or walk up the hill to our area to seek care and refuge in the result of an emergency. And after speaking with Chief Jeter about this, we don't have the assets or the coordination or the training for our staff or our volunteers to be able to properly execute any type of emergency plan at that kind of scale, where we are going to be looked to lead. And I think I was looking through in labor of statistics and like what cost the city in the next budget cycle. And based in 2018 was the latest accurate, basically it would cost the city between $74,000 and $140,000 a year based on from the occupational employment statistics for the U.S. as of 2018, which I think is money well served to create, to implement, to train staff, and to train local teams of volunteers that we can call on from the city that they can be a part of. And people would want to do that, and to make sure that coordination is looped between us and the school districts, because that's what is going to be a crucial part, as well as looking in nonprofits like the Red Cross, like what we just signed with the emergency declaration of the senior center, like making sure that those agreements are in place, and what happens and who do we call and what order do we do it, and making sure that everybody is trained. So I think I'm so excited that we brought this up tonight, and I'm grateful to Woody for his ear, and for Mr. Johnstone and Chief Jeter and all the things that I've talked about with them, because I think this is a big priority for the city as we are growing and we are looked to lead. And I think this is a big part of that.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Watson?
I agree with everyone on this one too, and we should actually do practice runs once a year like they do for problems on the coast. We do, when they start coming up from the valley of Bonney Lake. Pardon?
We don't do that.
We have something.
No, we don't do that now. We don't do any practice.
So if we have a fire or some disaster,
Right.
do we have a plan? Who's going to go
No,
where?
wait a minute. You said we should do the practice drills, right?
Correct.
We don't do that today. We don't do that now.
I'm not aware of it.
We don't do yearly drills or anything.
So if we have a fire and we have a drill, who's going to go where and what the plan is? Johnstone, do we do that now?
Currently, we do not do regular
That's
drills.
what I thought.
We do try and
I was under the
mobilize the
impression we did. And that's why I thought we we did this, got together with, what is it, all up and those guys that kind of do this type of stuff so that we can run these drills and get training from those guys.
That wasn't Woody's plan originally.
Can I respond to that, Captain Muir? We have joined that group, and there are trainings now in the pipeline that we will be participating in. For example, in October, Puyallup is going to stand up their Emergency Operations Center and do a mass sheltering exercise. And our section chiefs will have the opportunity to shadow their section chiefs, see how they operate, and have a better understanding of what we do. But those are just starting now.
We haven't done this before?
No, we have not. We've had some tabletop exercises
You do
where we have.
You're just trying to like divide them up into some kind of specialty class or something?
No, what Councilmember Watson seemed to me to be alluding to was a grand functional exercise of some sort.
Oh, right.
And we haven't done those.
Right.
But we do have some training that goes on a sporadic basis.
Correct. I was just trying to make the point that it was my impression that you are trained already, and everybody should be trained. I'm sure they are, but I'm sure if we have a big incident right now that anyone can like take over and start up. We did the fire drill. Did we just not know anything and had to call whoever? What do we have to do?
Well, I think you could ask the chief there because he was our incident commander.
Right.
He was able to stand up in EOC, so he's had some training.
Right. Officers are trained in that already currently. They should be.
Right.
And actually, everybody in the city should be at this point.
But they're not.
Right. Because generally, the ICS organization, the first person on the scene is those 60 some odd members or whatever you wanted to do there. They are them. They are everybody from the planning group to the ops group to the whole gamut. You're the on-scene commander and
Right.
everybody else.
One person is.
Yeah, until they call more resources.
Exactly.
That's part of all that training piece to know how that works.
That's right. But the people have to know what their roles are and how to perform them.
They have to know what the roles are and what the role entails. They don't necessarily have their role is. They might be in a different.
I looked at the org chart earlier today. There's specific people and specific backups.
Well, there shouldn't be. Basically, frankly, I think any emergency management kind of say that those are the roles, but yet anybody and everybody's going to be in those. You can kind of put names in them if you like, for convenience sakes. But whoever's there is that person. And the unseen commander is going to go, you, Mr. Justin, are operations lead. Congratulations, sit down. Military operation, basically.
Everybody need to know what to do and
Yep. And I can throw the book at you and tell you how to do it.
on the job training.
Nope, it needs to be trained. You need that.
Councilmember Ishmael.
I just have a question for in regards to what type of information do we have as a city of contracts or agreement do we have with the local school districts? Because it was my understanding that we didn't even know that we had that was the plan for Bonney Lake to be the emergency exit center for the schools in the valley. And I want to know what type of, do we have those agreements on paper of those emergency reception sites for children? Because that's a big concern for me. Also, do we have a list of inventory of things that we have in the city that we would use, such as blankets, water, backup power, backup internet, and where is that housed? Do we have inventory of those types of things? What are we working with as of right now? And
be specific to your questions. We do not have any agreements with the school district related to emergency management. We weren't aware that there are plans all to evacuate all the children in the valley and their schools, Lake Ridge Middle School. They don't have a plan for reunification of parents with children yet. So we don't have an understanding of what they intend to do. We do not have any supplies stockpiled. They have some supplies and intend to, my understanding, intend to get more to use at Lake Ridge Middle School. I forget what all your other points are, but we do not know what their plans are officially. We've had some conversation now that we are going to have an exercise in April of next year. But there's still planning to go on before that happens.
Okay. And I only bring that up, and I bring that up because I think that's a big crucial part in all of this, is to have those working agreements with our community partners in writing, on paper, so we know where is what. Like, I know that Cascade Christian loads up all of their children from the Sumner campus, drives them up Rhodes Lake Road, and their reunification site is the Franciscan Health Center off Main Street. So, but I bet you don't know that. And I'm not saying that that's not your fault. I'm just saying, I don't mean that as a bad thing as you're not doing your job. You're excellent at your job. I'm just saying, like, those type of agreements, along with Lake Ridge, like, this is all part of why this position is so important, because there's so many moving pieces with people and children and inventory that we need to have accounts for, so we know what's happening in our city when something goes wrong, rather than just having it be a secondary issue on somebody's plate, especially with Mr. Johnstone, who is excellent at his job and needs to be focused on public works and should not have to take on this very large role, and that's why I think this position is so important.
Yeah, so we funded the interlocal with the individual wellness organization. That's what structure they have. Sounds like we're not getting any value out of that now, or what?
No, that's not at all the case. I don't really understand why you would feel that way, but the bottom line is...
What I was hearing from you was that we're not trained and we don't... What I was hearing.
This interlocal agreement has only been in place the past 5 months.
Right. So if we're doing that interlocal agreement with external resources, how can we, how do we know that we're not getting what we need from that, or do we get more?
We were paid for part of a position with the city of Puyallup to assist us with the preparation of plans. So they are working with all of the cities in the interlocal to help them get their plans in place.
Yeah.
But there's a gap now between them and us in terms of preparing the plans at the ground level for the city of Bonney Lake.
Yeah, well, that's where I get kind of lost, right? Because you can see this.
I don't understand why you're lost. But
The architect doesn't build the house.
Right.
He gives you the sign.
But he knows the complete area. An emergency is not within the corporate city's limits of Bonney Lake. We've identified that emergency could be a lot of outside entities that are going to affect the city of Bonney Lake.
But the corporate responsibility relies with the city of Bonney Lake.
It does, and that's why we hire the appropriate people that can manage all of that thing, whether it's a regional earthquake or it's flooding down the valley that's going to drive a bunch of people into the city of Bonney Lake, or whatever it is, that you hire that emergency, or you resource that emergency function so that it can be area-wide. And what I'm hearing is that we're going to hire a person inside that's going to take care of that, and I can guarantee you that that doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Because you know why it doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Because, I think council members might have a different version of what this person is going to do. Because I think somebody's going to say that, oh, well, this person's going to train all of our people and make the plan and stuff like that. So Bonney Lake. So it's really, we're top notch. We got a great plan and all of our people are trained. Say, well, why did we have to hire a person to train our people? Just like Pierce County Department of Emergency Management, a lot of other larger entities, but East Pierce Fire and Rescue, they're East Pierce Fire and Rescue for a reason. They're not the City of Bonney Lake Fire Department anymore, because we recognized years ago that they're best served for the emergency function being area-wide.
Except that they also don't have a statutory responsibility for emergency management in the city of Bonney Lake. So they don't have any vested interest in making sure that that happens.
Right. So I don't know why, the city wouldn't have a vested interest. Clearly, they do have a vested interest in that. I don't see that the service provider changes that. Are you saying that because we subscribe to East Pierce Fire and Rescue, the regional fire authority, that we don't care? That the city of Bonney Lake is completely, doesn't care about fire? That's what I just heard. I just heard you say that because we don't have an emergency management person inside the city of Bonney Lake, that we don't care about, disasters.
Clearly we do care.
Right.
Because we're trying to set up an organization that will handle it.
Well,
that will take care of it.
Right, and that organization,
prepare us.
Right, internally to the city is like externally. You're going to have people that are going to help you how to set that up. You're going to have the experts in the world, whoever you can get a hold of, to train your people the best possible way. You're not going to hire a school teacher to sit inside the city of Bonney Lake to train your people how to do math. You're going to go out and find a math person in the world to train your employees on how to do math. Right? You see what I'm getting at is I think it's too thin. I think it's too vertical. I think you're thinking too colloquial about having an internal resource that's assigned to do emergency management within the city of Bonney Lake. That's what we're thinking that their job would be, because their horizontal understanding of the subject isn't good enough. They don't know. They don't have all the hooks out there in all the emergency management places everywhere. I think you need to bolster the external organization, because that's an issue, right?
And who will do that?
If you're saying, that's why I was asking if you're not getting what the resources or the training or whatever you're not getting from your interlocal agreement, that's not serving you well, then you need to look at the interlocal agreement to me for, to get more support from that interlocal agreement. Those are the experts out there. Those are the people that are going to do it on a day-to-day basis.
And they're going to step in and implement it in the city of Bonney Lake.
Implement it? They're going to tell you, the city of Bonney Lake people, how to do that.
And who's going to tell the employees in the city of Bonney Lake?
They would, right? They're the trainers.
They're going to teach. They're going to show you how. They're going to tell you how.
Yes.
But who's going to have the employees of the city of Bonney Lake do it?
Who's going to have them do it?
Yes.
Well, whoever you want, right?
That's what I'm proposing.
No. What does that person do? You hire a person just to say, yeah, go do that?
It's to help convey that information, that knowledge, and follow up with them,
See, that's what
and to make sure that they do it.
Because the external entity, more wider resource person that's going to be able to train your people on a wider. That's where you want to go, right? You want to go to the place that can train your people the best. And that is not a person that's going to sit at a desk inside the city of Bonney Lake.
In some respects, that's probably true, but in others, it's not. There are going to be some things that they are expert at, and that they can share that knowledge with people when they walk in the door.
Right. So that's why you subscribe. That's why we went to the interlocal agreement. Because those are the people that have that wide breadth of knowledge. I probably having an elongated argument with myself, basically, because I think
true, because
other people believe differently. But I'm on the track, and I'm so passionate about the issue because it's what I literally do. I'm ICS qualified. I'm on the West Coast Emergency Response Team. Yada 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 yada. It's been in all these unified command, whatever. That I've had that experience.
Well, it's wonderful that we're both so passionate about it. It's too bad that we can't come together on what a solution is.
Well, it is the best trained people, right? And how do you get the best trained people to effectively, supply that service, that emergency service to the citizens of Bonney Lake and the surrounding region? How do you do that? You're saying that we need a person here to be able to do that. And I'm telling you that, yeah, that's doesn't even work anymore. It's like hiring, an internal person to take care of your telephone system. You don't. You call people that know telephones and they come, fix your telephones.
You got to be an IT guy.
You do, but I can guarantee you that Chuck has hired more people know about to do most of his work.
And if Chuck wasn't here, who would be doing that?
Those external entities, right?
No, I mean, who would be calling those people? Who would be hiring those people?
Exactly. So if anybody thinks that, okay, I'm going to hire a person to sit around and be available for clients, did you realize that you just hired one person? This is a discussion we've had about when we had 911 dispatch out of here. Why don't we have 911 dispatch out of here? We had it in the police station. We got rid of 911 dispatch. That's a critical function. Absolutely critical function.
I would argue that's a terrible idea, was to get rid of it.
Right?
I would.
Well, but you had to resource it, right, internally. And that was my point about this, is because, you're looking at the person's 4 weeks of vacation, right, walking in the door minimum. They're possibly going to be looking at maternity leave. They're possibly going to be looking at illness. And that's your key person or whatever, supposedly. It better not be. Any one of the people in Bonney Lake, I'm like real confident that an emergency, and they're going to know who to call. They're going to call people, and they need that training to know who to call, so they know where those resources are. Online, sorry.
And Councilmember Watson, you have your hand up as well.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. From over a large viewpoint, yes, I agree with you. Together. From a smaller view that I brought before, if we have a fire next week in Bonney Lake, we as a city need to know, as council persons and city personnel, who's in charge, what's going on, who to contact. Deputy Mayor was down with the chief in our command center helping out there. But what's happening, we don't know who's in charge. I can contact with a city employee. I said, what's happening? I don't know, I just told them to go there and watch this road. That's what they were doing. So we as a city need to have those training sessions here with your staff and say, this is what's going on. Council people need to contact us, how you contact. This is our plan. If there's an emergency tomorrow, I don't know what we're going to do and try and call someone I know this information. And that's the problem.
They'll stand up in ICS, and we'll take their concerns. That we have the people that are question of how do you get them training, how do you get them this knowledge.
Right.
Councilmember Dole, you have your hand up as well.
Yeah, I think what I understand this is that we would need to keep that Epic EM in place, and that would help us partner with the surrounding cities and understand that it's going to take all of us to get on board. I think this person would really focus on our specific responsibilities, and if we just throw those to Ryan, as good as Ryan is, and I think he didn't really grab for the ball, it was kind of thrown his direction. I think what we have to do is understand that this person, if we are behind, which if we haven't been running drills and we haven't been doing
We
things,
have been running. Okay, that's great. Okay, let's not say things at least as council members that are inaccurate. I just heard that we do tabletop drills. I don't want the public to think that the city of Bonney Lake doesn't know what the heck they're doing.
we're not saying that. We're saying certain drills, additional drills,
Right.
more training, more education.
Exactly, correct. Yeah, I just don't want the public to think that don't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
We're talking about improving. Sure. We're talking about taking it up a level.
Improved training, sure. Yeah, absolutely. But I think in addition, we can all agree we have a fantastic plan. The summer grade fire was executed, in my opinion, very well. But what is next, and what is it that we could do better at? And we don't have a ton of major issues within the city. So yes, Councilmember Swatman, you're right. But what can we do to improve on what we have? And delegating the responsibilities to Ryan just doesn't make any sense. And so I do agree with you. It's got to be the right person. It's got to be somebody that has maybe a ton of experience and has done this, or maybe we can look at what that position looks like. But I think it's needed, and I think we have to keep the Epic EM. It's so new. It's just getting started. It's going to improve our situation here, and it's in the works. So I don't think we can backpedal. I think we do need to push forward.
Councilmember Ishmael, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the fact of, yes, the interlocal agreement I think was a great place to start, but I do not think it is prudent nor wise to have our emergency plan, our emergency, being developed and then without someone way outside of our city scope. And we have 20,000 people, 21,000 people inside the city limits, but our scope of who is going to look to us is probably more than double that. And I think it is wise to have someone inside our city that is the head point of all of this. And I understand Dan's perspective on being fiscally responsible and is this the best place to spend money? And I would say it is. As a background in emergency management, I believe it is important to have someone at the head who is who's breaking down what we have, what went right, what went wrong, who's going to lead the charge, who's going to put these teams in place, these disaster response teams, whether they're city employees or they're volunteers, who's going to prepare and analyze damaged assets from previous emergencies, like from Sumner Grade Fire. Have we gone through all of our barricades? I know we had a problem with that. We had a problem with Wi-Fi. We had a problem, things that didn't go right. Have we analyzed all that, broke it down so we can do better next time? Like, there needs to be a head point of someone who is in charge of all these things. And I do think it's wise, and I do think it's worth the money. And I'm very fiscally responsible when it comes to taxpayer dollars. But I know that the people look to us. And I do think it is a wise investment of our money. And I think that's something that we should absolutely consider.
Thank you. Ryan?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I was just going to add that my understanding of Council Plaza some old ground here, but my understanding of the EPIC local agreement help with the planning documents that we need to put together and also provide some training. But what happens here in a disaster is that those people, for instance, Kirsten Hoffman, who's the lead person on this, she works for the city of Puyallup. In a disaster, she's going to be busy taking care of the city of Puyallup. Mm-hmm. And we don't even have an EOC here that's fully backup generator powered. We have very specific needs to our city right here that we need somebody full time to tackle now.
So, sorry, comment. So we do have a police department. You said fully backup. So you're saying that all of the floors are covered by these?
I'm saying that the room that we used for the EOC during the Sumner Fire event, got to the point that it was so hot that people were trying to go outside to work because there's only half of the power outlets in that room that actually are hooked up to the backup power generator. It's wholly inadequate, and it's not appropriate for our use as an emergency operations center. It's just not appropriate.
Yeah, no, and I agree 100% right. I just want to make sure, because what I heard was that we don't have EOC.
You said, you both recognize that he said fully.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'll be ultra clear again, because I just hate it when the public is reading in the minutes, and they get like, oh, we don't have a, like, we don't have a large enough one or better one. Right? Sorry. Just saying, because if you're the Department of Natural Resources and you're fighting a fire, forest fire, what are you doing? You're literally in a tent. I'm not saying that we need a tent. I'm just saying, there's a million ways to.
Sure. I think, though, that what we need to consider here is that we do need somebody on site who can shepherd these types of issues. And we can't just continue to parse off pieces of people's duties onto others here. At a certain point, we have to recognize that we need people in critical positions providing key services for very important items. This is one of them.
Right. But again, I would clarify my comments, and I'm not saying that, any of the duties whatsoever by this person or that, that somebody else in the city should be taking those over. My position is that it should be resourced externally so that they are doing those duties, and that so that, you're not having to do extra duties of this emergency function. You're just being trained on how to do them so that you understand that you do that on a daily basis anyway. So that's kind of a no-brainer, It's just because again, because of my experience, running a pipeline system that's 421 miles long that ships gasoline, jet, and diesel fuel at 9,000 barrels an hour to the state of Washington and Oregon, that we have zero on-site emergency management people. We have extraordinary relationships with many external agencies that can fly in and, appear at moment's notice. We have every single one of our people trained like all of our guys and gals here are. I'm pretty sure that if there was an emergency outside, you'd see a bunch of these gentlemen get up and start doing what needed to be done. We figure it out.
I would like to say something on that.
Fleming's had his hand up.
Yeah, one of my fundamental beliefs is that the purpose of the city of Bonney Lake is to provide for public safety. As I move around our locale in and out of the city, it's hard for me to tell who's on city water and is this a city street or unincorporated Pierce County or Auburn. You can't tell. But I can tell that I have a Bonney Lake Police Department, and that is one of the key functions. So public safety is critical in my mind. But I'm suspicious of having a full-time person for emergency management, and the fact that now at some point in time after the plan is developed and after the training has been accomplished, now do we have a problem looking for a solution and creating other problems like requirements that they find ways to create more requirements for that create a larger bureaucracy. So I would think the prudent approach would be to if this is urgent, it's obviously important. I'm not going to disagree with that. I think it's one of the first priorities of the city. If it's urgent, then we figure out how to staff it, to solve it in a reasonable way. But I would be suspicious that it would be a long-term solution because I think that we're not going to cover every contingency. We are not alone, and we really do need to look at what are the potentials and how things work. But then after that's done, do you need a full-time person doing that? Or is that a function of the executive branch to make sure that and through a contractor that comes in and ensures and audits you to make sure that your training is complete, that your plan has been reviewed, that that you indeed the resources that you describe are there. I can't tell you how many times I've experienced facilities in crisis and their generators don't work, and because they don't have oil, because they weren't maintenance, because the birds built a nest in the exhaust and it hadn't been run for years. I don't think a full-time person is going to help us with that. I think it is worthwhile investing though seriously for the short term, maybe a year or two, to try to figure out what needs to be done and address it in a serious way. I agree that this is not a others duty as assigned problem. This is one of the critical things that should be done. So if we aren't having the resources that we need, then let's get the resources. I don't like the privilege and entitlement that would tend to come with a permanent emergency management position.
Actually, maybe just to piggyback on what Councilmember Simon said, one option would be a limited duration projects position. If the concern is, hiring a full-time, essentially with this opportunity, maybe it's a 2-year position to kind of get our ducks in order, work with the Epic EM, work on training for staff and things like that. And certainly I want folks to understand. I mean, we are wholly capable of disasters. As Member Swatman said, if the windstorm came tonight, the public works crew would work hand in hand with the police department, and they would be out there getting roads opened and making sure things are operating safely and that. So, but I think what we're looking at is the bigger issue. I mean, the Lahar, the big magnitude 9 earthquake, and the more regional. Granted, windstorms are regional. A bigger, large-scale event where we're effectively cut off from the rest of Pierce County. FEMA isn't flying in with helicopters and taking care of us. Pierce County EOC isn't running up the hill to save us.
Councilmember Ishmael, and we'll wrap up with this, I think.
I just wanted to kind of spearhead on what Councilmember McClymans was saying. In a sense, I could see this being, a 5-year position or a 3-year position to get started, and I think that would be a great place to start. I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that Mr. Johnstone cannot take on this role. He has a significant amount of work and responsibilities that he needs to focus on, and I think that as Mr. Evison is retiring, and that this has to have a place to go, and we can't ignore the fact that preparing, training, and implementing emergency management plans for those large-scale events are important as a council and as an administration. And I also see this job not just from a pact of preparing and planning, but also PR. I think this director would have a PR piece to it where they're visiting schools, hospitals, community groups, and making those relationships that you need in an emergency. And that's a key part, and I think, of this role from a public relations perspective from the city, to making sure that those relationships and understandings of agreements are organized on paper and ready to go when they need to be enacted. And that takes personal relationship and investment, and that's a big piece of whoever this would take this role on, rather than having somebody 3 cities over in Puyallup coming up with an idea that doesn't live here and doesn't know our people and doesn't know our school district and doesn't know our hospitals and doesn't have that relationship piece, because it's crucial in emergency management to have those relationship pieces invested. And I think that's something to acknowledge.
All right, thank you very much. One last thing, Councilmember Carter.
Thank you. I would bounce off that and say I agree. I think that the city has grown, and we're going to go through people, and the training needs to be ongoing, and changing of plans needs to be ongoing as the city changes. So I don't know that this is just a one-time, one-and-done kind of deal, and then we set it, it will lay in a cupboard for another 20 years. Yes, ICS will come in and we'll throw people into positions, all that kind of stuff. But Councilmember Ishmael's right in the fact that this stuff is based on a lot of relationships, knowing where the stuff is, okay? So depending on which disaster we're talking about, and obviously everything's different, we're going to fly that ceiling a while, and we're good at doing that. But we want to try and make sure that we give ourselves the best shot. In order to do that, I think it's important to put dollars where they really are important. And as Councilmember Lyman said, be fiscally responsible, and that this duty of the city of public safety.
Not only that, this person would be able to go out for grants that we're not currently exercising, which could offset some of that cost, or offset some of the costs of the training and additional facilities and things that we require.
Yeah, and I think that the interlocal agreement was merely a Band-Aid to get something done, to get a plan that we could put on a cupboard somewhere, but it wasn't really to really take care of stuff.
All right, with all that said, Woody, do you have an understanding of the direction here?
Well, thank you, Deputy Mayor. It's really not my direction nor my decision to make. I think the administration has heard you. I don't know if the rest of the council members are willing to put their money where their mouth is, so to speak. by authorizing in the biennial budget, some that would either hire a contract employee or a full-time employee or whatever it was that the council will support. But essentially, that's what's going to have to happen. Going to move forward.
Something I can support.
So, I mean, from the administration's perspective, I mean, that's what I've heard is that we'll put together some options for you to consider at the biennial budget later this fall.
I agree. All right, thanks everyone. That was a great discussion. Moving on to item D. I'll let you take over item D. D is finance, right? So.
Item D is D 2174, which is up for discussion.
This is the East Town permitted use and development regulations. We had this 2 weeks ago at a workshop where we, or maybe it was at a council meeting where we tabled it to this workshop for further discussion. So I will turn it over to Senior Planner Jason Sullivan.
Thank you. Yes, this was at the August 3rd City Council workshop. We kind of briefed the council on the changes. I think there was one question we didn't really do a good job of answering, and that was kind of the why are we doing this right now question. We did try to expand on that in the agenda bill. Really, the thrust or the reason that we're worried trying to get this done at this point is we need to expand the list of permitted uses related to light industrial manufacturing uses to specifically support development that's currently underway or proposed to be done. We have a number of company buildings that have been built and they're looking for tenants. Some of those tenants need this expanded use in order to be permitted use in East Town. Additionally, we're focused on reducing the complexity and increasing the flexibility in our code. Currently, the regulations for East Town are contained in 2 separate chapters, so developers have to read this chapter and then go over and read this chapter to make sure that they're understanding everything they need to do. We're kind of removing that complexity and moving into a single chapter so we can do that. Additionally, the standards that were written for East Town assume a different development pattern and style than that's occurring out there, and relies on very prescriptive standards. The amendments establish standards that are more supportive for light industrial development and removes the city's prescriptive approach to development, and increasing flexibility for property owners on how they design their buildings and the uses that are allowed to go into those buildings. And in addition, it's also to support the creation of, further the creation of family-based jobs. So that's really why we're doing it. It's not to create more regulations. It's not to create more or new rules. It's to streamline the rules that we already have, provide clarity around those rules, increase flexibility and development opportunities for the developers that are doing projects currently in East Town. And I can answer any other questions that the council may have.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions on this? I'm seeing none. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. In these, changing the flexibility and stuff on some of these and the warehouses or whatnot that might be out there, some of the uses of those, I think we talked about last time, some of those, say, a gym of some sort, where having kids around versus trucks and all this other kind of stuff, where you see a lot of different types of uses in the same area sometimes. Did we come to a conclusion as to what that was, or things that were not permitted, I guess?
We haven't changed the proposed ordinance at this time, but if there's uses that are currently council wants us to have back in, we can do that. The approach that we took was to focus, like I said, on that light industrial manufacturing type uses and encourage and support that development that is currently underway and that lots of time and money has been invested to support that development pattern that's already underway out there.
Thank you for that. I applaud changing it to flexible.
Oh, Councilmember Ishmael.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear Councilmember Dole. He was cutting out, so I'm not sure what he just said. But in regards to the flexibility, so what exactly are we being flexible on? I'm just curious, only because I know that we were talking about deciding between light industrial or then gathering places. And I recently went out to Auburn, where there is a light industrial park across from the outlet collection that is a mixed use property. It has light industrial, it has trucks, it has deliveries, it has manufacturing. And on the other side, in the same complex, it also has a gymnastic studio, a bouncy house, a ballroom dance studio, where there are gathering places for people. And it seems to work fine. The front facing, the gathering places are the front facing, and then the light industrial are the back facing of the center. And so I'm curious as to why we can't come to some kind of compromise in that.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily trying to come to a compromise. I think there's two things. So to answer the first part of the question regarding flexibility, one of the complaints that we heard when the first industrial building that went out in Easttown was Teeter. And Teeter had a very prescriptive approach to having to design his building. You need to do X, Y, and Z, and a lot of those X, Y, and Zs really didn't fit industrial standard, and there was lots of kind of complaints and presentations to City Council about the fact that we need to change that. So the flexibility is taking that prescriptive approach away and saying, this is what the overall vision is for Easttown. These are the things that you need to include and take into account, but how your architect designs them is kind of up to your architect and will be presented to the city's design commission. They will review it and make a recommendation to us. So it provides the architects with the flexibility to try to meet qualitative standards versus measured prescriptive standards. So that's one. Two, we've significantly expanded the permitted use, right? So while yes, there's some uses that were removed, there are some uses that were expanded to support the development that's already occurring out there. And I think the third part of this is you can go through different areas of the state and find where there is this kind of mixture. This project was originated out of the ideal that we want to have Easttown not just to be an area where there's some light industrial, but an area in which we get designated by Pierce County as a county-wide industrial center. And there are no county-level industrial centers newly established a couple years ago to provide the gap between the regionally identified Sumner, Frederickson. I think there's one or two in Tacoma. So there's only 4 regionally designated manufacturing and industrial. They have a little heightened visibility. They have a little bit heightened responsibility, and they have a heightened kind of when companies contact Pierce, the thought process is when someone contacts Pierce County Economic Development. I know right now the planner down in Sumner, Ryan, just gets a direct line from Pierce County Economic Development and starts putting people into the Sumner Manufacturing Industrial Center. That's how they landed Evergreen Coffee. So the idea is by doing what we're doing in our zoning code, it supports us to get that identification as a countywide industrial center. That also helps us qualify for grants for both transportation and also from the CRB board, which is the Community Economic Revitalization Board, and they do infrastructure improvements. And they have been begging us to apply for grants to do infrastructure improvements. So this is the type of work that sets us up to really develop part of our city as an industrial area, light industrial area that brings the family wage jobs back and try to help with some of that reshoring of American. So that's kind of why we're doing it to get it done.
Okay. Thank you, Jason.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
She said thank you.
So we had to cut out of the uses to maintain that or achieve possibly the manufacturing industrial center, right? We had to prevent multifamily, I guess, right?
That was one of the uses that we pulled off. And we haven't really had any multifamily developments kind of proposed in the part of Easttown that we stay in the Easttown zone.
So, but was there any other specific things you had to do so that you were still on that path to achieve that manufacturing industrial center?
What the piece, the countywide planning policy say for designation is that you need to limit non-industrial light manufacturing uses and demonstrate that there are manufacturing light industrial uses as the focus. There's not a list that I can go by and say, A, B, and C needs to come off, D comes off. What we looked at was the industrial land study that kind of classified industrial jobs regionally and made sure that all of those NICSs were on the land use matrix. And some of the NICSs that are more retail established, would be more appropriate in Midtown, were kind of removed from the list, knowing that we have Midtown as it is, plus we expanded Midtown to include all the way up to the View by Vintage property and all of downtown, which is where the long range plans are trying to envision all those types of gathering spaces.
So, because from last time in this discussion, my worry was the person that wants to build their larger building or what have you, have excess space at the particular time when they're building their building, they want to use it for some odd use, plus or minus, in the interim, because, they know the future is you're going to need X number, hundreds of thousands of square feet, but today they only have, they have a tenant for half of their building, and that they can make that work. They can put the entire, building on the site, but yet they have this half of the building they haven't done anything with, so they're going to put these odd uses in the, it's an interim until they get larger clients out there. And that was I didn't think we
didn't get into that, and we have not seen that as a big issue. I know when Fiddle Creek Phase 2 was built, it was built on spec, meaning they didn't have any tenants. The developer had no problem landing 2 tenants, one of which I think, I don't think they're 100% aware, but really need this to go through to support that second tenant. And then the other really big chunk of Easttown that's left is kind of the Peak 410 development, the Compass Point development, and all of the uses that I've talked with the developer that they're looking at possibly having on those sites isn't here. That would take up, between what's out there now and getting Compass Point and all that done, would probably get you to about 70 to 75%. We did get another RV storage facility pre-app in for out there, which would be a permitted use now and under this ordinance. But the uses that we're seeing out there are starting to coalesce around this. And so the people are wanting to be there. And what we're seeing too is people that want to be close to the Sumner MIC, but don't need that much space or can't afford those rents, are looking for a place in close proximity. And we're closer than Frederickson, or we're closer than Puyallup. And so there's kind of a niche market that we're finding ourselves in. And we're just trying to kind of capitalize that on that for the benefit of the community and the citizens. And it also helps with transportation. The more family-based jobs we can put here, more manufacturing jobs we can put here, the less people we have commuting out of the city.
Well, my only other thought was because, where I'm coming from, I'm worried about limiting the uses of somebody's property with the way they want to use it, right? And so the flip side of that is that I suspect you'd have to go with some kind of a, you'd have to prohibit X number of uses. But that's just the opposite same problem, right? It's how do you know what to prohibit? Because if you had a list of prohibited uses, then when somebody comes in with a use that's not on that list, you'd have to let them do it. And you'd be like, well, we should have not permitted that. 50-50, right? So there was any good way to.
Yeah, I think that it's a balance. And I don't think there's any good way other than say that it's a balance between the global whole and the individual whole. And it's trying to balance both of those. I will say when we've done the sub-area plan updates, when we've done those types of things, and I think Councilmember McClymonth mentioned this, is the citizens also see this as an area of getting more light industrial development. We really don't want to put more houses out there and have to have more cars driving out there to Easttown, right? The nice thing about industrial development is the commute patterns reversed. So they would be going out in the morning, which is when 410 is at its lightest, and they would be coming in when 410 is at, you're starting to reverse that transportation pattern. So there's lots of reasons why to do it, but you're absolutely correct. It's a balance and a tension between two opposing ideals and trying to find that balance.
I guess hopefully in the end, I'm going to support whatever because lots of words generally I can figure out usually. So what's wonderful about having expert staff, right? Always tell me when I'm wrong.
I would never say that. I would never tell you you're wrong.
Always good. But, it's, from my perspective, try to be as liberal as possible when it comes to something. So that you can try to find, hopefully staff is trying to find a way to make their use work within code or what have you. It's like, whether the bouncy house is an athletic activity or whatever it is, if this is a larger classification, or the brewery or whatever, type of a thing, because knows what the people want to do with their buildings. Or
We're committed to working with any developer that wants to. I give to both the planners who do permit review is our job is the technical expert to know how to regulate businesses and regulate development, but our job is also the technical expert to explain to people what they can and can't do and help them understand where the flexibility is in the code and how to craft projects to work within that code. So they have both responsibilities and they need to do both. And that's sometimes being a little creative to understand that, because we are the technical experts and we need to be able to explain both sides.
And as much as I'd like to buy my neighbor's house and build a Carl's Jr. there, I can't do that. So some requirements have to be there.
But still, we're literally saying that there's some uses you can't be retail.
Right there.
And
in my neighborhood,
well, you see, you're taking, you're going to that weird place where it's like, yeah, of course, you're a resident. Operation. We're talking about East. So,
I think some people.
You're talking about the putting like a bouncy house thing, our house.
Right. But yeah,
it sounded like they found a creative way to be able to work with that.
Councilmember Clemens, you had your hand up a few minutes ago.
Yeah, how do we propose changes to the table in the ordinance that have things that are prohibited?
If there's a specific use or specific item that you want me to add back in, just let me know, and we can, if this goes forward to the next council meeting, we will just tweak the ordinance. That's why we brought it to workshop, so we don't have. So if there's a specific use you want me to add back in, just let me know, and if I kind of see enough head shaking around the council, I'll just pencil it in before it comes back to the city council.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else on this discussion? Good
job, Keith. Well, so the next step would be to take this to council for a vote, either on the consent agenda or regular agenda, which is why I was looking at Councilmember McClymans to see if there's any uses right now he can think of or items he wants me to tweak on that list.
Yeah, I would like to propose 3 changes. So, I can send them to you, and then you can send them to the council, or we can talk about them now. It's everybody's choice.
Put it on full council for the next. Do you know what they are now? Kelly?
Yeah. So I would like to add the dancing, music, art, drama, and instructional schools back into the East Town. I've seen practical ways that happens in those sorts of environments for, it's itinerant at best. It's never a huge thing, but it's a way that I think Councilman Swatman was talking about, that those things tend to pop up because of the cost and opportunity. The same thought process, I would say, is true for, as I went through here, maybe public meeting halls and recreational facilities. I think it's the same thing, that the opportunities for people to meet there. The same with religious, philanthropic, civic organizations, and maybe social advocacy, business professionals, using large areas like that for a little while for some purpose. large rooms. Those were the ones when I reviewed the table that I thought were appropriate, that I could see a large facility and a large group of people for a short period of time could take advantage of an opportunity. And I've seen that in the wild, right? I mean, I've gone to some of those places where I'm like, what am I doing in a industrial park? And I go, well, this actually kind of works, and it's just the group's stepping stone until they get they've outgrown a little area and now they need a bigger area, but they're destined for it. Yeah, the final. And so that
The
was
only
my
question, the only question I had for Councilmember McClymans is that would be adding the last two back in completely. They are current.
yes.
The religious, philosophic, and civic organization, busy professional government, those are currently not allowed. And so you'd be proposing to add those in as
Correct.
And that would I mean, obviously, we're trying to make this a manufacturing industrial center.
I would say I think it's not a huge issue. I think even some of Sumner's and some of the other ones had some of these uses. I think we were taking a narrow view, because we had such limited land. I would be more desirable if that's what would support the ordinance passing, adding those uses back in and dealing with those uses so that the whole package works. Because it's more, for me, it's more important for the whole package, not just these continued kind of discussion over those 5 or 6 items, unless the city attorney has any other ones.
No, I mean, we can talk offline and make sure there's no legal impediments to any of that, but for now, we have the list and can bring it back next.
Councilmember Ishmael? You're on mute.
You're still muted.
You're muted. Councilmember Ishmael, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I was saying that I would concur and support Councilmember McClymon's 3 additions to the ordinance and would feel definitely more comfortable in passing the ordinance if those 3 amendments were added, those 3 use purposes were added to the ordinance.
All right, thank you. So having everyone's input, it looks like on consent agenda then for next week.
And we will,
With those changes?
we will put those changes in.
As long as they clear legal after review.
Yeah, I think we'd like some latitude to put it on full council if we feel like more discussion or input from the council is needed. But I think if we're good to go with the changes, we'll go ahead and put it on consent.
Okay, that works. Good. All right. All right, we know executive session. All right. Seeing nothing else, this meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Have a good night.